Welcome! In today's video, we're building a diorama for this guy, as well as some other creatures. This model was sculpted by Benji, who sent it to Michael in Canada, who turned it into a model kit and sent it to me. And I didn't want it, so I put it in a closet. Just kidding. Now let's get started. I found a beautiful glass cloche to use in this project. Now we need to work out the composition. You can't just jump right into it. We've got a lot of vertical space. Let's make some high ground for the Montanoceratops.
Don't try it!
Next to that, there could be a fallen log, kind of like a ramp. Now if it's a hollow log, I could put a critter in here. This might go here, and we'll need some trees to reach the top of the glass. This guy goes right here, stepping onto the log. And this end can have a bunch of roots. This is an interesting composition. We've got the exposed tree roots, giant log coming across, and a swamp. All fitting inside the cloche. First, I need to raise this rim past the base. That'll work. Time to build those big roots with original Sculpt. This is an affordable and easy to form clay. It's perfect for this, but terrible for details or strength. The tree I'm making is called a bald cypress. They've got these knees that grew up from the roots to the surface. Ours will be in water. I'm using a ball tool to replace the fingerprints with bark texture. The roots are coming together and ready to bake. We won't be needing that support anymore, but I should fill that empty space. How about more roots? The underroots are ready to be merged. Merge success. Very rooty. It's looking okay, but it needs some smaller roots, branching off all over the place. Put them everywhere. Right now these are just wires, but I'm gonna blend them in with modeling paste. This is a goopy medium made for acrylic painting. Much more natural. Let's add a quick base coat before moving on to the next step. Next step, I'm combining modeling paste and Sculpt-A-Mold with some natural Spanish moss for the finest of root goop. Delicious. These just get draped on here. Shove them in the cracks if you have to. With this final slathering, the roots are complete. Next up, the log. I got it from a paper towel roll. I'm stuffing the tube with foil scraps to give it some rigidity. With some aluminum wire roots. Super Sculpt is back. Unfortunately, this paper tube is too squishy to sculpt on. So I'm gonna roll up a stronger core. Perfect. This end is done and ready to be baked. I covered the core in packaging tape to prepare it for what's next. I'm using Sculpt-A-Mold once again. It's kinda my favorite, which is a mixture of plaster and paper fibers. If I smush this on here, it should create a hollow shell. Now I have to wait for this to dry. It's not fully dry, but who cares? I think this is gonna work. Not bad. Now to hollow out this side. I hot glued some wires inside to reinforce the structure. There's a natural crack here right where I want the hole to be, so I'm just gonna follow it. I'm mixing up a second batch of Sculpt-A-Mold. This time it's chocolate flavored. Every inch must be covered. I don't want any tinfoil showing, or aluminum. While that dries, we need to make this look like this. Starting with aluminum wire. Oh, that's gotta hurt. Spiky. Let's pose those so they look less like nails. Now I'm mixing the goopiness of modeling paste with the texture of Sculpt-A-Mold. This should dirty up those wires. Add a little bark chip here. The next step should be familiar. This time I'm mixing Spanish moss with sand, and Mod Podge, and paint. I'm trying to get an organic look, capturing all the fine soiled covered roots. Here's how it looks from this side. And I went ahead and made a stand in disguise. It should be completely camouflaged with the other tree. And that's the log, for now. Next up, I'm replenishing my stick supply. Because it's time to grow our roots into a tree. These get baked. I found a bald cypress that matches our roots perfectly. It's even dome-shaped. I have a neat piece of driftwood here. It needs to fit from this side, and from this side. The base of the trunk might look better in this orientation. It's gotta look like this somehow. Let's see if it even fits. That does not look natural. This branch needs to be modified. Nice. Now it's looking like the reference. Now we can fill it out with other pieces. I'm using this split piece to make it look like the tree broke off at one point, which matches the reference. Now it looks like a jumbled mess. but I'm gonna blend it into one trunk. I colored the Sculpt mold again, which will make painting a lot easier. Now I'm mixing up a stickier batch to cling to the armature wire. I don't remember what I put in here. Probably Mod Podge and modeling paste. And now we can finally bring our pieces together. Time to base these. I'm using a small amount of plaster. I'm leaving a border for the glass. This will also be important to create the edge of the water. I can create a wall along here to retain the resin. Watered down paint will flow into the texture. Speaking of, we gotta paint those trees. I'm going from light to dark with some washes, black with brown and honey brown. I'm also adding in some yellow ochre. Down here, the wood would be darker from all the water. Some more yellow, right where it transitions from wet to dry. I also noticed some lichen on the bald cypress. I bet I could replicate that with this wiry paintbrush. A quick way to make patches of little spots. The bark is coming together. Let's add some texture to the terrain. I'm mixing my colors into black sand and modeling paste. This is some pumice I stole from my plants, as well as gravel and some more sand. Those rocks need a wash. It's coming together. For our next step, we'll need to go outside. Just what I was looking for. A leaf. Big leaf makes small leaf. I have some dry leaves from previous dioramas. I'm gluing those in place with some watered down Mod Podge. And that's the terrain. This is Didelphodon, drawn roughly to scale. I'll be using an otter to stand in for all the soft furry parts. He's starting out as a blobby snake. Let's add some limbs. And digits. Now I'm gonna blend these blocky forms into fur. Time to paint. And let's test him out. He's looking pretty cute, but the fur texture doesn't look very realistic. Let's see if we can bring it up to the next level. With yarn. I'm using this to create little flocking fibers that I can glue on. Do you think this will work? It's looking pretty mangy, but we're not done yet. I'm going to brush his fur with some water. I have some pastels here. I'm going to use these to create some color powder. This way I can color the fur without globbing it up with paint. And there's our finished Didelphodon. Now back to our scene, because it's time for moss. Woodland Scenics Turf is how we're gonna do it. I'm making a wet climate, so there's gonna be a ton of moss. With Mod Podge again to glue it in place. That's looking lush. Now let's move up to the tree foliage. I'm airbrushing some preserved asparagus fern to get the color closer to bald cypress foliage. Nothing like a plant to imitate a plant. Now I'm adding a bright green highlight. I also painted a few of the dead needles brown. The next foliage is underwater. Before we can pour resin, we need some aquatic plants for the fish to hide in. This is green Spanish moss. I'm dunking into watered down gloss paint and battering it in knock leaves. Nice, these will work. Let's add in some real moss for a different aquatic species. This would make good nesting material. The swamp floor is looking alive, but it needs a fish. This is an alligator gar. They come both fossilized and living. We're doing scales the easy way, by cross-hatching with a wire brush. Time to paint. I like to keep a reference handy to match the right colors. With our fish securely hidden, it's resin time! I'm going to use a cardboard retaining wall with a glossy packaging tape liner, tightly fitting around the plaster edge and hot glued in place. Can you guess who's sponsoring this video? Let's resin! This particular resin is deep pour epoxy. Mixing up a large amount of epoxy can create heat, which causes it to cure too fast. That's why I chose this deep pour resin. This is 2 parts A to 1 part B. This is the color I'm going for. The color picker says it's yellow. I'm separating a portion of the B side to work with. That way if I add too much dye, it'll still get diluted. I've got yellow, black, and a tiny bit of green. Now I can dip this toothpick into those dyes. It doesn't take much. I think we got it. Pour that back with the rest of B side, and we're ready to mix the resin. There's no rush with deep pour epoxies, so I'm taking my time to mix thoroughly and scrape the sides. Now we're ready to pour. I'm expecting some of the resin to soak into the cardboard, so I'm pouring the water level slightly higher than I need it. There's a few surface bubbles I can pop with heat. They fear the flame. 2 days later. The resin is fully cured. Some resin did get into the cardboard, but it should be fine. Let's crack it open. That's a successful pour. We need a pop of color. Let's add some Lilly Pads. I'm mixing green paint into some thick acrylic gloss. This will make it thicker and slightly translucent. Those are dry now. Now for the flowers. I'm using regular computer paper because it's nice and thin. Layer those with some paper glue and a touch of color. The last step is to fold the petals around this ball. And there's a flower. They look a lot better after folding. I'm adding a couple gloss ripples. And more gloss on this cut edge. But I wasn't satisfied. There was too much of a lip and it didn't look good, so I'm grinding it all down. Everything was going well until I accidentally sanded the surface of the water. I was a little distracted. Here it is with 400 grit. I polished up the edge, which surprisingly worked. But I couldn't get the top scratches out, so I masked it off and sanded all the way through to 8000 grit. It looks pretty good, but not perfect. Then I finished up any rough spots with gloss varnish. I'm using this airbrush gloss because it's very thin. There were a couple leaks, but they're pretty easy to clean up. With the water complete, it's time to go plant shopping. You can't have too much life. Ew, a tree. These palm trees make for easy ferns. I'm painting them so they don't look plastic, but I can't seem to get the color right. Let's take a look at the real thing. This is a pretty warm green, so I'll start with yellow and black. Now I'll add some actual greens. The hue seems close, but it's too dark and saturated. Let's bring in some light gray. This is very close, but is it a match? I think we've got it. I'll apply this color after placing the ferns. I'm going to add a highlight color to mimic the light passing through the foliage. Make sure not to rinse your brush off in your drink. Next up, let's make a flock of birds. This is Alexornis, or what's left of them. North American birds are not very well preserved. If you want a good fossil, you'll have to look at Chinese birds. And for a living reference, I'm just gonna make sparrows. Those get baked. Now I'm making the wings out of cardstock. Very simple. We're gonna do most of the details with painting. The flock is finished and ready to roost. Now it's time to paint the Montanoceratops. I came up with a few color schemes, but they weren't working in the scene. So I did a little artistic thievery and copied someone else's. They're very talented and definitely worth a follow. Now let's get painting. These colors are more muted than they look. So, like the green ferns, I'm adding some light gray to get the right tone. I'm giving him a lipstick look. This is underpainting that'll get mostly covered up. Muting with gray again. I'm mixing this black and yellow together, with balancing clear. This should create a transparent green tint. I'm using this to add some subtle variation. Now I'm going around and adding a second tone to each color. With the airbrushing nearly complete, it's time for brush painting. I'm starting with metallic blues to match the eyes of this cormorant. Can't forget the inside of his nostrils. Now I'm doing a light wash to bring out the scales. I'm starting pretty thick and blending it out with water. And with that, the painting is finished. But there's a problem. This foot is too flat. That doesn't look very natural. I've got some freshly boiled water here. The heat should soften the resin. It needs a little touch up with super glue and paint. For the final touch, I'm adding a drop of UV resin to the concave eye. I love how quickly this resin cures. I did this for about a minute to make sure it was fully cured. You probably thought we were done. I did, but then I remembered the frogs. I folded a clay snake into an S shape for the legs. The sides need a little more mass. These will be our final creatures. And 2 eyes on the top of his head. Time to bake. Steady. Focus. You can do it. Oh, it's okay. Just get that lower iris. Frog complete. I found this mold putty on Amazon. All you do is heat it up and you can reuse it over and over again. And with UV resin, I can create a frog army. Our colony is complete. Frogulus, Frogticus, Frogcellus, Frogostine, and Frogalius. All the pieces are finished. Just gotta place these guys in their habitat, and it's time for the reveal.